think we need to address it, and we need to at least carry the public hearings. Once we get, any questions worked out. We don't have much, if any, and but things can deteriorate rapidly, and we see on the news quite often people living in just totally in conditions that you wouldn't have a dog living in, and this would alleviate some of that.
Have we had anybody come to complain about the conditions they were living in?
We don't have complaint from people that are living in the conditions, but we have had complaint about homes that may or may not meet the level of this ordinance. This is a minimum housing code, so what you and I may choose to live in may not be maybe far above what the minimum may be. And so that it may not address every issue that's out there that someone driving by says, or living next to says, that's got to be torn down, or that's not a livable environment. It very well may be a case where upon inspection, it is minimum housing, that basis. And I do want to address real quick on the eminent domain issue. The eminent domain is that the town somehow own the property when all is said and done. There's no transfer of property. There is potentially, after a very long adjudication process, the removal of a structure could be the final action. But that doesn't remove the property, the real property underneath it, does not convert to the town of Summerfield. Now there can be tax liens to pay for things of that nature that could lead to a tax sale or something of that sort. But it is not an eminent domain that you hear about where they're trying to do economic development or things of that sort, where they're going in and buying up a neighborhood and changing it over to another private property. That's not this. That's not this form. This is to clean up the situation.
But this could easily lead to that with some of there are some poor areas here in Summerfield that the people wouldn't be able probably to bring their structure up to standards. It will lead to that.
Well, I think we need to take a look at it and then have a public hearing and let the public tell us how they feel about it. I mean, the town belongs to the public, the citizens, and like you, Michael, I've heard some complaints about a couple of residents here. So, and I hear what Ms. Strickland said, and I don't think we ought to do something and then walk right in and keep them out. But it's something that we need to take a look at, developing something and then have a public hearing and let people come in and tell us how they feel about it. Because they're the ones that live here in the town as well as we do.
You're essentially establishing an inspections department too, and you're growing government, and I certainly don't think it should be done before next fiscal year.
Well, it won't be done before next fiscal year, because this is a long drawn out affair. It's going to take time to research and put together, so it's going to be after next fiscal year before you can do something on it.
I have one other question about the heating standards. The state statute only calls for 68 degrees. Why do we put 70 degrees?
Page
18.
We may have been gleaning from an older set of code regulations. That's an easy fix.
And then it requires town electric plugs, it requires town plumbing code. It's not just a housing code, I mean, it requires everything else too, plus an inspections department.
Let me answer that, because I had that exact same question when we were doing our review on it. We have a town plumbing code, we have a town electrical code, we have a town building code. It's all the Guilford County and by extension, the state building code. So that those already exist by de facto rule. Because I asked that very same question. This says we have a town plumbing code, and the legal answer was, yes, we have a town plumbing code now, it's the state building code.
Because it's a state building code. Then you have room size restrictions as to how many can be in each room.
Again, that's all state code. Those are all referenced back to state code. Those are state code now. All it does is those actions, those size limitations or whatever they may be.
Well, I just think this is too intrusive in private property and people's lives. Apparently, Guilford County thinks so too.
No, Guilford County doesn't have the statutory right to have it.
Counties don't have the same authority as cities, municipalities do.
Can you tell me what the extent of this problem is presently in Summerfield? Do we have 2 homes? Do we have 10 homes? Do we have 50 homes? That may or may not, if we enacted this, would not meet the minimum housing code.
I cannot give you a definitive number because I haven't gone out and actually tried to count every place that may fall into it. I would say that there are probably less than 2 dozen off the top of my head that might come close to it. Of those 2 dozen, maybe only a dozen or less would actually fall under if an inspection was formally done on the structure.
Well, let me quantify that, just because it may be that certain aspects, because, you know, there are 2 levels within this ordinance, basically. There's the level of getting to the point where you are, as Ms. Strickland said, demolishing someone's home. There's the other level of where there are only a few things, issues in the home that don't meet the state building code. And now, how many homes we have in town that may have a couple of things like that, you know, that could become enforceable under the ordinance, you know, that would have to be something we have to try to survey and try to figure out. I myself, and I doubt the manager has a real clear answer on that. Well, I can.
Well, that's part of the public hearing process. To enact an ordinance of this nature, a municipality must do 2 things. First, have a public hearing and make findings that conditions do exist within their corporate limits that warrant the enactment of this ordinance. And then if so, then you could hold a second public hearing as to the form and shape that the ordinance in fact takes. So it's a twofold process. Most municipalities have held 1 public hearing and made findings with regard to the need for the ordinance and then adopt the ordinance thereafter in the same public hearing. That doesn't mean that the town of Summerfield has to do it that way. The town of Summerfield may have a public hearing just on the issue of whether conditions exist and to what extent conditions exist to warrant the enactment of this ordinance. If the council finds that there's not enough out there, then case closed. But I think Mr. Ray's point is, let's get to that point of having that hearing. And I think staff would be in a better position to advise Ms. Flowers with regard to the volume of, based on windshield surveys, what might be out there.
Well, windshield surveys, and we could speak with, have conversations with the county building inspections department about, inspections that they're doing out there and what problems they see as well.
So will this be complaint-based? Is that how it will be addressed?
There are
based on
2,
complaints?
3. I'm not thinking of one right at the moment. Currently, the way the ordinance is written, there are 3 different ways where it tells me, I can only think of 2 at the moment, but 1 is complaint driven, and there has to be 5 citizens that complain about it. They have to sign a complaint form, basically, saying that they're to initiate an inspection. The other is it can come from whoever is designated as the housing inspector for the town.
The third is public official. Let's assume for argument's sake that somebody from state DOT is out doing line work or Duke Energy is doing some line work or something like that, and they notice violations. Given their capacity as a governmental agent, they can initiate it as well. That's the rarest of the 3 cases.
And the first one that's going to come up, in my opinion, is what the Historic Committee considers the historic Saunders Inn, and then the Historic Committee is going to come to the town and ask for hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that moved and restored. That's the first thing's going to happen.
I would argue that that's not a residential